Welcome everyone. Welcome to the webinar on Track Your Production. You can't manage what you can't measure. My name is Renee with RUBBLE Master, and I'm your host today. And I'm really excited to welcome two industry experts to this webinar. With me on the call is David Boardman with SR Measure and Tim Maloy with Beltway Scales. I would ask you guys to introduce yourselves. David, please, would you give us some background about yourself?
Sure. So hello, my name is David Boardman. I'm the founder of EveryPoint, inventor and provider of stockpile reports. Been at this, we launched stockpile reports in 2012 on an iPhone 4. It was a long time ago, but we've been focused on figuring out how to digitize every pile on the planet every second of every day. We've come a long way in a decade, but we still got a long way to go. Companies use stockpile reports for enterprise inventory management for that quarterly or annual valuation, and they use phones and drones and installed cameras, however you can get imagery fast and cheap to be able to do those valuations. Now, within the last year, we've made our iPhone app available to the mass market just through the App Store. Anybody can download it anywhere in the world and measure once a day for free with an iPhone 12 or newer. No LiDAR required. Sometimes people get confused by that. When we say 12 or newer, it's not because we need a LiDAR, it's because we need that processing power. Because now we do it in real time on the phone. So that's what we do. Every day we get up and figure out new ways to measure piles faster, more accurate, and more precise.
Thanks, David. Also on this call is Tim Maloy with Beltway Scales. Tim, could you give us a quick roundup of your background?
I'm Tim Maloy. I'm with Beltway Scales, previously Sauk Valley Systems. I started here 26 years ago at Sauk Valley Systems. We had a name change. We had a few ownership changes. We're currently with Cardinal Scales, a branch of Cardinal Scales. And we manufacture in-motion weighing equipment, conveyor belt scales, is what most of you know. If it's on a belt and it's moving, we can generally weigh it. The mobile crushers and the newest big thing, track-mounted conveyors, we put the first scale, me and one of the founding owners, put our first scale on a mobile crusher in 1999 or 2000. It was an old Pegson. And we went out for 2 days and we spent a week doing it. And we've come a long way since then. We've come up with fixtures for our standard scale that will allow them to be installed on inset or recessed idlers. And we've also come up with a roller scale that has a speed pickup integrated into it. And it's a much lower profile, so it'll fit inside portable crushers. People use conveyor belt scales for everything from just loading trucks, so that to cross a truck scale when they leave the quarry, to inventory management, tracking with online data collection. You can do downtime reports, inventory reports, historical data. You can monitor from your cell phone. Technology is everywhere today. I think our original slogan was, if it's worth conveying, it's worth weighing. So if you're going to pay to move it from here to there, you probably want to know how much of it there is.
I absolutely love the slogan there. If it's moved across the conveyor, it's worth weighing. Absolutely. Why should crushers and screener operators measure their production? Tim, what is your take?
You need to know what you're running, whether it's if you're a contract crusher and you agree with your client to use a belt scale to manage, the throughput and what you're going to bill on. If it's for inventory, if you're stockpiling, you got a mobile spread that you move to 2 or 3 different quarries a year or every other year. You want to know what you put up before you move your spread, that you can manage inventory, you can track downtime, you can track wear parts based on tonnage, as opposed to, it's been 6 months, let's change a screen, and I don't know the details of those things, but based on actual throughput, you can monitor efficiency, throughput, downtime. You can prevent overloading trucks or underloading trucks, which take more time to go back and fill off, or worst case scenario, get pulled over for a fine if you leave the quarry overloaded.
David, your solution goes a little bit further than just a belt scale. Like, where do you see more applications?
Well, I can say again, I'm the computer scientist, computer vision person, and that's always a dangerous person to come talk about the business of rock. But I have been getting my boots muddy for a decade now and learning as fast as I can, as much as I can. And honestly, over the last 6 months, have learned a heck of a lot about the world of crushing and have been going very deep. I've been going out on some ride-alongs, going to different sites and learning everything I can about the business of crushing and what's involved. And I tell you, most of the folks who are using our app or SR Measure to help with production tracking are the folks that are in contract crushing, right? And it's so important for them, what I hear, is because it's how you get paid, right? So if you're getting paid by the ton for what's crushed, then you've got to have great data to get paid. And there's lots of disputes around payments. And sometimes you have a wonderful belt scale, it's perfectly calibrated, you're very confident in it, but you submit your invoice and the customer still doesn't believe you. Right. And there's a discussion back and forth. Right. So what I hear the most about when it's tracking production, it's to make sure you get paid and you can get paid with as little dispute as possible. That's number one. And then number two, I think, as Tim mentioned, there's things where people want to stay on top of productivity. Like, how's my team progressing? How much more are we going to be able to get done by the end of the day? When am I going to be able to break down my equipment and move to the next site? Right. So being able to tell, how many tons per hour you're pushing, and then also finding when you got that black belt time, when some reason there's not material moving across it, that's really important for the guys to understand so that they can be profitable at the end of the day. The guys I talk to, and I've done ride-alongs, I mean, they're juggling multiple machines across multiple sites and they're doing multiple jobs. And so being able to optimize, set up and tear down and when they're going to get to the next site, that's all make or break, man. They can either be profitable and take some money home, or they can lose their shirts, right? If they're not managing the production process effectively. So that's what I've seen. That's what I've learned. Again, it's dangerous to ask the tech guy about the business of rock, but I can just echo that's what I've learned from spending some time with some great people.
David, do you see that a lot of your people that use your technology that have belt scales? I talked to a lot of customers, and they have our scales, and they integrate both.
Absolutely.
They do, what's on the ground versus what we think we put on the ground. And I think it's a peace of mind thing. It's a reinforcement for billing.
Yeah. Everybody I've ever talked to wants a belt scale, right? That's number one. You want a belt scale, you want an accurate belt scale, you want a precise belt scale, right? And that's your starting line. But then the real world punches you in the face, and that doesn't always happen, right? It can be that I just can't afford a belt scale, or I'm renting a piece of equipment and it's got a belt scale that I just can't trust worth a dang, right? Because it's not very well maintained and calibrated, right? So the number one is, yes, give me the belt scale, give me an accurate one, give me a precise one. But then there's the reality of the real world, and it says, well, hey, I need to have some backup. I need to check this belt scale, make sure it's really making what it says it's making, right? When I walk into the trailer with the invoice to the customer, if I can walk in there with data from the belt scale and data from what's on the ground, now I've got multiple data points to present the invoice, and that gives the customer more confidence so that they can just say, hey, here's your check, right? If you're doing progress payments along the way, or if you're getting paid at the end of the job. So what I've been hearing, it's not one or the other, it's both, right? It's just that when you're talking about just production. Now, we can talk later about lots of reasons to measure things before the job or after the job. But if we're talking just production, it's customers would prefer to have both. Some of our customers don't have a belt scale or a belt scale they're confident in, and then they figure out how to use the volumetric measurements from the app as a way to track their production. Not ideal, but they do it. Work with what you got.
So it comes down to what the title of this webinar is. So you can't manage what you can't measure. You got to know what's on the ground. You also got to know what's coming across the belt. I mean, it's the one thing to sell to a client, let's say those 10,000 tons that you crushed, but you got to know how effective did you do it. And for this, you got to need an actual scale on the crusher.
Our Plant Connect online data collection. So we have mobile phone apps. You can monitor the scale production from really anywhere in the world. It's a standard belt scale over on the left, and we have different pieces that help adapt that to inset and recessed idlers on mobile crushers. Ideally, and I will always recommend to a customer, if you've got this conveyor you see in the background there has top mount idlers, a nice 8 or 10 foot weighbridge span, easy install, best results, shy of moving indoors with flat rollers. It's got a shallow troughing angle. Always recommend that. A track conveyor after a crusher is recommended just for the same reasons, generally easier installs, and you might get better performance. It's a tight fit inside a mobile crusher, but we have scales in there that perform, and the customers are happy with them. So if you want to change, I've got a few examples. Yeah, so these are different machines. On the left is what we call a catenary idler scale. Catenary idlers are, I've heard them called sausage rollers, string rollers. It might be a cable in there, or the idlers are linked together, and the force is pulled in from the sides where they're anchored. So that load cell mounts on the side and measures the weight on the catenaries. I see those a lot on milling machines, asphalt milling machines. The next one over, the green one there, you can see someone's added a little bit of a, I don't know if you can see that well on your screen, but welded a piece of angle iron to a modified C channel to mount that idler on the belt scale, and it's recessed mounting. We've done lots of those. The next one happens to be a track mounted conveyor, not a crusher, but same thing, recessed, a little bit more open and better picture of what that looks like. Another option, the last picture on the right there in the top row, is very similar to what we did on that very first Pegson 25 years ago. We mounted it outboard with the curve of the conveyor inside and the amount of room that was available. We just put a couple holes in the side and mounted the load cells external. Some people will not let you do that to their crusher, and we've got many alternatives now for mounting inside, so it's not always necessary, but you still see those from time to time. The latest addition we had, this came up 4 years ago. The bottom left there is a roller scale. The speed pickup is inside the roller, and the load cells are collinear with that roller under those yellow covers. And it's a much lower profile, 5 inches top to bottom. So you've got room between your belts, and you can place that between two existing idlers. It's an easier install, or you can still replace an existing idler. The jury's still out on as far as accuracy of a standard scale inset versus the roller scale, but we've got quite a few of those out there, and customers seem to be happy with the results. The middle picture on the bottom is like a product conveyor, a side conveyor from a portable crusher. I call those spline conveyors. It's a 6x6 or an 8x8 tube box, and sometimes they're just the V rollers, the trough rollers. Sometimes there's a small flat roller in between, but you can mount our scales on those types of side discharge. And then there's a very nice close-up. In this instance, they removed the idler set from the C channel and bolted it directly onto our load cells with that little Z bracket that it's bolted to is one of the options we have to facilitate mounting a scale inside between the belts on a mobile crusher. So there's lots of options, and we've got a lot of good dealers out there that can look at an application and come up with a solution.
Basically, if I understand you correct, Tim, it always depends on the machine model and the conveyor type that's used to make a decision what you need to install.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's the thing, when you start looking, if you call us up for a belt scale or call a local dealer to ask about it, if you can send pictures, there's standard things we need to know. What's your flow rate? What's your belt speed? What's your idler spacing? So we can give you the right size scale to measure your load. But then if you can give us pictures, in between the belts, so we know how the idler's attached to the frame and where the cross members are, supporting structures, where we can place the scale, all that's helpful.
You mentioned that most mobile crusher and screen operators put a belt scale rather than a stack and conveyor than on the actual crusher or screener itself. Obviously it gives you more versatility because you can put the stacker after any conveyor or plant. But what other reasons are there why you want to put this on a stack and conveyor?
Right. On the pro side, a stacking conveyor is less vibration. That's probably the biggest thing. The vibration, the ease of installation. You've got more room to work generally, and a lot of those use the inset idlers. So you're the same type of installation, but you're not, on the output conveyor on a standard mobile crusher is much shorter than, maybe you've got a 20, 30, 40, 60, 80 foot stacker that gives you more room and more selection for where you can place your scale. The only con I could think of when I was putting this together is that you need that second piece of equipment. If you've got a mobile crusher and you're moving it around, you can weigh it right there, and you're not reliant on anything downstream from there if you're just putting the material directly on the ground. Generally, you'll see better results from a secondary stacker like that, or a conveyor where the scale doesn't have it, and vibration is a really big part of that.
So from your experience, whenever someone puts a belt scale on, let's say, a mobile crusher, is space the primary reason, or why would you rather put a belt scale on a crusher than on a conveyor?
I would always rather put it on the conveyor, but a lot of scales go on crushers. It's just the convenience. I think it's there, and whatever comes through that crusher, you can weigh it. And a lot of components on mobile spreads, contract crushing, they get mixed and matched at different jobs. If you always have a scale on that crusher, you know what it's doing, regardless of what conveyor it gets paired with, or if it's, like I say, just dumping on the ground. For results, I think you'd probably get better performance, and it all depends on the application and the installation, how the scale performs. But overall, the conveyor, easier install, much less vibration, generally a little bit better results.
Another avenue for contractors or material producers who started processing their materials is another product offering of you guys. It's an actual truck scale. When does it make sense for someone to get a truck scale versus using the conveyor to track production?
So where I see, and I'm not the truck scale expert, Cardinal manufactures the truck scales, and where I see them are in quarries where they want to monitor everything coming in and everything going out. That's how they sell their product. That's how they pay for whatever comes in. If it's an asphalt plant. The other thing is if you need a certified legal for trade scale, truck scales are installed, designed, built, documented, and calibrated, kept up as certified legal for trade most of the time. And that's, I think, the best way to do that.
That was interesting. Once I was on site with a client, and that was a lot of times they're talking to me and to our company about making sure the belt scale's calibrated, right? And I've seen folks actually run the belt scale into a truck, take the number off the belt scale, run the truck across the truck scale, and say, "Yep, we're good, right? Belt scale's, good for the day. Let's rock and roll." So I've seen those two work together. I don't know if people do that commonly, but a couple times I've been with clients, I've seen people do that.
Yeah, it's built right into our integrator. There's an option for test weights or material test, and it's actually the best way. The test weights will define the performance of the scale as far as, I put weight on it, I took it off, the load cells responded. But to calibrate to a certified truck scale is the best way to dial that in. Very common.
How often does a scale need to be calibrated?
If it's possible, when you move to a new site, set up and start crushing, and you're able to run a truckload and check it, I would do it. That's another thing with the mobile crushers. It's not as easy to hang test weights. Usually the truck test is the only option quite often that you have for calibration. Same with the track mounted conveyors, because if the rollers are inset, then the test weights are kind of a tight fit and not always an option. So how often, to go back to your original question, the zero calibration every day. Start up, your whatever your spread is, your belts are running for a couple of minutes to get warmed up and seated properly. And by that time, the load cells are at whatever their operating temperature is for that time of day. And you do a zero calibration. It'll do two things. It's like a tear on a truck scale or on a platform scale. It tells you where your starting point is, and it'll reveal right away if a load cell cable got cut overnight. If your zero says 0 was 67 pounds, now it's 32, you know there's a problem and you can find it. The 0 changes with conditions, if it's windy, if it's raining, so it needs to be checked more often. The calibration, you know, is this 10 tons 9 or 11, or is it exactly 10? Doesn't need to be done as often. What I tell customers is whatever you need to keep you sane. You know, if you're billing over it, you might want to check it daily, and you can calibrate to a certified truck scale, and then just drop your self-storing test weights, drop them down, and look quickly and say, I know when I put my weights on, this conveyor runs the same speed every day, I should see 372 tons an hour. And you can check it very quickly on a daily basis. Calibration isn't required. Like I say, a 0 cal I would do daily at least. Trim calibration, unless you change a component on the scale, maybe if you change products, if you're running a much lighter load than you were, it is gravimetric, so the changing products and product density isn't theoretically a big deal, but in the real world, it's better to check, you know, if you're going from a 20% load to a 90% load, and you have the ability to do the calibration.
Could you, in the absence of a truck scale, could you use like a tool like or measure to verify the calibration weight?
Absolutely. That's what a lot of guys are doing with it. Like I said, their first objective is to get paid accurately, and so they're using a lot for that. But a lot of folks are using it just to do those sanity checks. If you don't have a truck scale, right, and you're on the site, you at least want a sanity check. And so they'll run, you know, 5-10 minutes and see what the belt says. And again, that's in tons. And then they'll go walk around it with the phone. I think I even have a picture of it later on my deck where they're doing exactly that. And then, you know, they have to do the conversion factor or the density, right? Because we're talking two different worlds, tonnage and volumes. And, but if it's for a sanity check, from what I hear from the guys, it's like, you know, if the belt goes out of whack, it really goes out of whack, right? It's not like, oh, it's, you know, slightly off and that's going to bite me. It's usually, you know, hey, if I need to stop and work on something, it's because it's pretty far off. So when they compare, you know, the volume times the conversion factor to what's coming across a scale and go, yep, I'm not as confident as I would be if I ran it across a truck scale, but if I don't have that, it's a great alternative. Because otherwise you're just, you know, what are you going to do? Eyeball it, I guess, you know, run it for 10 minutes and guess what's on the ground and compare that to your belt scale. So yeah, people do that all the time.
How close, David, do you get this volumetric measurement to the actual tonnage? Because volume is I mean, density depends on the material, obviously, and especially when you run, let's say, recycled materials.
So now you're getting into where all the bodies are buried. So the what I've learned doing this for a while is fortunes are made and lost in moisture, right? And I can some things the people that work in the industry can't say because I'm a little more distant. But I remember, you know, gosh, it was probably 10 years ago. For one of the first times I was on a site, I saw a loader go and take a bucket out, push it to the side, and then dig deeper into the pile, put that in the truck. And I was like, well, why did that guy just go into the pile twice? And the guy just kind of smirked and he said, never sell dry rock, right? And I mean, that's just the reality is, you know, there's this war out there between people buying bulk materials and people selling bulk materials about, hey, don't sell it too dry. And the people buying are like, don't give it to me too wet, right? It's like, how do you control that? So that's where fortunes are made and lost, in that conversion factor, moisture, and density. So there is no magic bullet, but people that are experienced, like some of the contractors, I mean, they roughly know what the densities are. And so they'll run the volumes and they'll go, hey, density's on this, it runs heavy, it's 1.6. They'll run it and they'll look and they'll go, yeah, it's good enough, right? So there's always a little art to this world of bulk materials measuring. There's the science, but there's also the art, because, you know, this stuff doesn't come in a box, right? And it doesn't come with a barcode on it. You can't count it perfectly. So the key is to count it multiple ways and make sure that, you know, things are always reasonable. So, but if you're looking at volumes from imagery, you know, whether you're doing a drone or a phone, it's called photogrammetric techniques, you're going to be within about 2% of what you would get if you were using a very expensive laser scanner in terms of volume, right? Photogrammetric techniques are always going to be a little less accurate than the laser world. So when you look at, well, what can you get if I go buy some drone processing software in a drone, or what can I get with SR Measure? Yeah, best case scenarios, you're going to get within 2%. We achieve that by people dropping 2 orange cones 25 feet apart. But if people don't want to mess with those cones, then they can just do it without the cones and get within 5%, right? And for most of the time, for most of your day-to-day decision making, that's good enough, right? Because it's better than your new hire trying to phone in and say how much they've done today, right? You'd rather have that new hire go out with the phone, be within 5%, you can be confident about it, right? So it's really about right tool for the right job, and what number is going to help you make a good business decision. But yeah, volume and tons, it's always fun. And it varies by industry too, right? Because landscape materials, you're dealing with volumes, you're usually buying and selling in volumes, but then you have the wonderful world of compaction and fluff, right? Ride a loader over a pile of landscape materials and you just lost $30,000 in value, right? I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy. People drive themselves insane trying to make the numbers balance. And boy, everybody just does the best they can.
David, can you run us through how this works, the process of taking the measurement and you and I got to know each other at the World of Asphalt, and like, wow, what's that? And I didn't know it before, and maybe for those who don't.
Yeah, sure. So as a group of founders, we're all computer vision professionals, and we've had a couple of different businesses over our careers and been involved in businesses. But we wanted to see how we could take this image processing technology and apply it to some commercial market use cases. And again, this was about 12 years ago. And that's when I was turned on to the problem of bulk materials inventory management. And I was just gobsmacked that I could sit with a CEO of a bulk materials company and he could literally look at me and say, I don't know if I'm going to have $100 million adjustment to my financials or not at the end of the year, right? And he's like, what? How do you run a business where you could potentially have $100 million adjustment to your inventory? And it happened a decade ago. I mean, it doesn't happen so much anymore, but 10 years ago, it was really hard to measure this stuff. And so we looked at how can we use this image processing technology to drive the cost out of valuing inventory and to make it easier so it could be done more frequently by more people. So you didn't need very few people with expensive technology with high levels of training, but how could you put something into the front loader driver or the scale house operator's hands so they could run out and do an inventory count? So that's where it all started. Now, over the last year and a half, 2 years, what's changed is we've moved from inventory valuation to operational use cases, because thank you to some technology development from our team and thank you to some technology enablement from Apple, we can now do this in real time on an iPhone. So where before, if you were flying a drone or if you were using our old iPhone app, you'd have to collect the imagery, you'd upload it to a cloud, it would process for a few hours, and then you'd get an answer. Well, that's fine for inventory valuation, where you're doing something at quarter end or month end. But if you're trying to decide how much did I crush today and how many more hours till I can move my equipment, you don't want to wait 6 hours for an answer. You want an answer now, right? Or do I need to, stop making this gradation of product and move to a different product? You need answers now. And this is actually a RUBBLE MASTER customer, contract crusher, Eric from Midwest Crushing and Recycling in Illinois, Missouri. And you see, he's just got an app. He opens it up. It says, hey, start to measure. He's just walking around. You can see fairly casually around the pile. You see on the screen, really small, you can see it's giving him some guidance. And then boom, it's done. And you can see it computing. So it makes a 3D model of that pile he just walked around, and it tells him it's 441 cubic yards. And you see how fast that happened, right? That was just what, 4 or 5 seconds from when he walked around. Now, on the right-hand side, you see we can also measure materials if you happen to be storing it, inventorying it, staging it, whatever, into a bunker. And this will guide the user. Again, could be a loader driver, could be the scale house operator, because they literally just follow the on-screen instructions. And it tells them where to walk and where to look, and takes them, from wall to wall across the bunker. And you'll see knock out the other side, get that front wall, get that inside wall. And it's going to tell them, hey, one more pass across the front, and then we'll see how fast it computes the answer. So, you know, it's taken these folks probably 30 seconds to do the collection process. And then let's see here. You know, we're at last tap, and then we've got a couple seconds here. And what's that, about 5-6 seconds, boom, 512 cubic yards. And you can see that red shading there. If you saw that, that was where we didn't see imagery of that top. So it gets hallucinated or estimated or mathematically modeled, however fancy we want to get with the words. So you can see, hey, did I see enough of this to really be confident in the result? Or should I take it again and try to see the top there, right? So that's the app. That's what's new, is the ability to do that in real time. We put it in the App Store in October, and it's literally been downloaded and it's being used actively in 105 countries around the world. We have people measuring materials in Mongolia and in Fiji, the Philippines, every state in the United States. And as we've started to talk to say, well, how did you find the app? Why did you find it? What are you doing with it? We're finding a lot of people doing contract crushing are doing it. And that's how I, met you, Renee, and that's how we got pulled into this, because we want to learn more about that market and how can we make this product even better for guys like Eric. So in the top right, you see him there. He was kind enough to drive me around to 5 different sites. I think we were in his truck for about 14 hours, going around learning all about the business and, how he goes home with money to feed the family and what can happen where he doesn't come home with as much money, right? And how this app helps him do that. So that gives you a little overview of stockpile reports and this app, SR Measure, for measuring stockpiles, and how it's used.
What a good overview. And what I like about the discussion here is you ultimately, especially when you're contract crushing, you're gonna need both. You need the belt scale and you need the verification. And there is the right tool for every job. Towards the end of this webinar, I would like to get more into tracking the production over time. And Tim, you mentioned you guys have a solution or a telemetry to document production. Can you tell us more about that?
Our Plant Connect app, and a lot of customers, we offer cellular modems. Put it on the side of your crusher and it spits the scale data up into the cloud continually. And then you can log into your front end of that database from anywhere in the world, on the cell phone app, Android or iPhone, from a PC, tablet, anything with internet connection. And you can monitor that. You can look at the guys on the ground are looking at the dashboard to see what the rate is or how much weight they've run up that day. You can look at the rate graphs to see historically what you've done. With the newest release of the app, you can tap right on the rate graph at a certain time and put a note in for downtime. And then at the end of the month, you can run a report on your downtime and say, I've been down because of this feeder 6 times this month for 45 minutes, and we need to take a look at it, so you can decide what needs attention, when it needs attention. You can do historical reports monthly, at the end of the year. You can set up reports one time and have them emailed every day, every week, every month, whatever you want, to a list of people that are set up as users on your account. So all the data is there, and it's usable by the guy on the ground who just wants to know what he's done for the day, where he's at based on what his target is, where he needs to be. And it's also used by the front office and the accounting department for tracking over time and in managing inventory.
From your experience, Tim, do you see that the scale printer is going away, or is this something we're gonna see for many more years? What's your take on this?
You say that again. I think the scale, I think they're going to be around for quite a while. I think David touched on this earlier. I think it's checks and balances. So from their loader scales now, the technology that wasn't there probably 20 years ago, they've gotten better. So you've got the loader scale telling you what I put into the crusher. You've got the belt scale telling you what came out of the crusher. You've got the survey telling you what's on the ground. And if you've got a truck scale, it's telling you what's going out the door. So everything or whatever pieces of that you've got, you can check and balance, and all of that makes you more comfortable, helps you sleep better at night.
Yeah, catches those errors before they get out of control.
Exactly. Yep. One can point to an error somewhere else, and so that's helpful. And a lot of people have one of those options or two of those options, but it all helps. So I see the need for weighing material as it's in motion is probably not going to go away anytime soon. And because there are more options today than there have ever been for weighing material on a moving belt. So
that's actually a very good point. I mean, you want to catch those errors out there, and some days those errors start creeping up on you, and they're minor, small percentages here and there, and you don't notice it until you look at finally some data that make this visible to you. This brings me to a very good point here, and what I would like to weigh in as well in this discussion. RUBBLE MASTER also has a native belt scale solution, and what it does, it's on the mobile crusher, retrofittable, so there's pre-fabricated mounting points on the crusher, and the beauty there is it's integrated with the crusher telemetry. So the crusher knows exactly, okay, what is the engine load, how well is it performing, but at the same time it knows how much is it putting out. So you can make those judgments on connect the dots between how well is the machine performing and how much is it on load, how much does it put out. And this is quite interesting to learn those things. Can you push the operation more? Is there improvement potential? Am I losing production over time with my crusher? And it also allows you to send out those reports to clients, whether it be through a traditional printer or email. There is also a telemetry app that we call it RMX Smart telemetry, that's on your phone in your excavator cab, that shows you some basic operational data from fuel consumption, engine load, and whatnot, to, if you have the belt scale, production data. And what's interesting right there is, I would like to point out this, the ratio of the final product. So if you operate a closed circuit impact crusher, it tells you how much finished product is coming out in the end and how much is being recirculated back in the closed loop configuration. If this thing is going down, you gotta readjust your closed side setting. You gotta look after something. You gotta lose production somewhere along the line. This is one of those things that Tim mentioned. You gotta look for those problems in your operation that are not visible otherwise. Because at the end of the day, it matters if you produce 10-20% more a day. Say your production is 1,000 tons a day. If you produce 100 tons more a day, this is significant. I mean, this is now a small scale operation, but when you think about quarries or big operations, where you have way higher tonnages, this changes the picture completely. Also, what you're able to do with the RMX Smart telemetry app is you can zero the scale from the cab, so you don't have to run down the pile to hit the zero button. You can do everything conveniently from the cab here through the app. Also, it gives you a machine report. You can narrow this down by job, so the guy in the field can send out a PDF report, or in the back end, you can connect the dots between the actual production, what went over the main discharge conveyor, or the secondary discharge conveyor, and, for instance, fuel consumption. How much fuel did you consume? How long did you run? And this helps you understand, do you make adjustments to your operation? There's further down the report, there's also a combination between, okay, this is your production, this is the engine load, how well is your operator doing? Maybe you need another screening plant in the mix to balance out the load, to get the production up, to get fuel consumption down. There's a couple of things you can look at, but without data, everything is a gut feel.
Since we're starting to talk a little bit about the future, and you hear these words thrown around in the media or from tech companies and this and that, I mean, I'm excited about what you're showing there, because data is the starting line, right, for digitization and optimization. And when I talk to people in the industry, I always say, man, this whole industry, this whole world is run on hope and heroes. you just use the word gut, but right. I mean, so much is done because somebody's been doing it for 20 years and they know what lever to pull or what button to push in order to make things successful. But now that you have all this data from those belt scales, from what you were showing in the machine, from volumes on the ground, image processing of equipment and people moving about the scene, everybody's hearing of this buzz and this hype about AI. But as soon as we can take that data and feed it all into these learning models, right, we can start to have the expertise and experience of somebody who's been crushing for 30 years, right? Suddenly the computer is telling you which lever to pull and what button to push. And that may sound pretty far out there, but the reality is I think if we got back together in 5 years and had this same webinar, we'd be having a dramatically different conversation, right? Because these technologies are becoming so accessible, so available, that all we need to do is start to integrate this data and put it into the brain of AI, and the whole productivity of crushing is going to change, right? And so when you read those headlines about AI disrupting everything, a lot of it's hyped, overhyped, people trying to raise money, trying to make some money. Silicon Valley has a lot of snake oil. I apologize for that. But there is reality in there that this is happening, right? And the world of crushing is going to be completely different in 5 years than it is today. And I love the data you just showed. It got me excited because that's the starting line, right? Is to have that data from the scales, from the machines, from the environment, all starting to come together and move from hope and heroes to automation and then optimization. So it's an exciting time.
Absolutely. And it comes back to what you can't measure, you can't control. You guys brought all very good points. There's every tool that we discussed today is a piece of the puzzle. And you need to piece this together as you see fit, and depending on your operation. You know, you might want to start out, maybe use a belt scale on a stacker and have SR measure to confirm it. Later, maybe put it on a crusher or at a truck scale. So it really depends on where you are with your business. And the more you know, the better you can become in your business.
Yeah, agree. So since this is a webinar and we're having a little fun talking about future, today it's humans with an app walking around, right? But the future, you get the human out of the way, right? In the future, it's installed cameras and it's wearable cameras and it's cameras on the front loaders digitizing that crushing operation every second of its operation, right? And so while today people are using an app and they're getting a volume from an app when they choose to walk around the pile, the reality is you can generate the volumes of that pile every second from some installed cameras, or if there's a camera on the loader driving and buzzing around, we can be continually digitizing that space and generating volumes all day long. So do you do that today? No. Are we gonna be doing that 5 years from now? Absolutely. Where is it in between? Not sure. But all the technology's there. It's just a matter of the market being ready, right, and solutions being available. So it's going to change fast.
You know, Tim, you have your telemetry and tracking solution. There's the apps, also telemetry on our end, on the crusher side. Everything is going digital, and data is the one end, knowing the tonnages. But the second thing is making drawing the right conclusions from it is probably a bigger challenge in future than collecting it, because the tools to collect data are there. How do you draw the right conclusions for your business?
It's been challenging. Well, it's challenging today because this industry of bulk materials is not used to working with technology, and it doesn't have the resources to work with technology. Very few companies have true technology teams and technology professionals in their organization, not to be technology masters, but to know how to apply technology and roll out technology at scale, right? So that's been a huge challenge. And that's why construction is only behind hunting and fishing as the least digitized industry on the planet, right? But that's where the excitement comes in for AI. Right? Because where AI can come in is AI can extract those insights just as smart individuals would that are needed, now we can replace those necessarily knowledge workers with AI that don't exist in the bulk materials industry and the construction industry. So AI is actually going to help things that you're talking about and you're showing move a lot faster, because it's going to fill the knowledge gap that exists in the bulk materials industry. So you can tell I get a little excited about it. But we've been working on this for a long time, and I think we're at a point now where these technologies are coming together to finally digitize.
I've seen a lot of change and progress in this industry over technology over the years, but it is, like you said, far behind a lot of other industries.
Yeah, it's the realities of the challenge, the stuff that you can't put a barcode on this stuff, you can't put an RFID on it, and there's just not a lot of technology experience in this industry, and that makes it hard. Doesn't mean we should shy away from it. It just means it's going to take some extra innovation, and it's going to take some people going first.
We had ArcNet 25 years ago, data collection on a PC, a DOS-based PC, and we had 5 customers that used it. No one was interested in the data, and that's a lot different now, but there are still customers who want, a 4 to 20 output and a pulse for weight to their PLC. They don't want to talk about communication. So it's leaning more towards the digital side now than the analog side, but there are still holdouts.
Just catching errors earlier can result in massive, if you're a producer, it can be, dollars per ton we're talking about on the table, not nickels or dimes per ton. Because all it takes is, one crusher going out of whack a little bit and generating a bunch of waste that has to be hauled by trucks for the next week, to suddenly, you've just had hundreds of thousands of dollars in expense, where if you could have caught that an hour or two into it, you could have eliminated all those costs. And those things just jump up and bite people in the butt all the time, right? Nobody wants to talk about it, but that's the reality. They're all just firefighting through a day, trying to keep equipment running and trying to keep trucks rolling, and not necessarily thinking about, well, how do we optimize our profits, right? Because it's just too hard,
All right, guys, it's an interesting discussion. I'd love to move on, but we are hitting here an hour, and we appreciate for all those who sit through this webinar. We also want to get to your questions. So thanks, Tim. Thanks, David, for all your explanations. It was a really interesting discussion. Tim, maybe you want to tell the crowd where they can get a Beltway scale in case they want to get a Beltway scale on.
So go to beltwayscales.com, and you can send an email. You can call Beltway Scales. Should have the number out. You can find us on Google. But we have dealers all over the world, all over the country. I think on every continent except Antarctica. So wherever you are, we can get you a belt scale.
David, same question to you. Where to get the?
Yeah, so if the biggest hurdle for most folks is if you got an iPhone 12 or newer, that's your starting line. So go find an iPhone 12. Maybe you got to grab your kids, grab a neighbor's, go buy a used one, whatever it takes, and then go to the App Store and download SR Measure, and you can start measuring once a day for free. Now, one thing I'll share is we're about to launch version 6 in about 2 weeks with a whole new model based on feedback from crushers about how they can deploy this to a small team of people. So for example, a contract crusher might have 5 or 6 different sites, and they want to outfit 10 employees with it. There's now a business version coming out in 2 weeks where there will also be a website where everybody can see the results. You can see all your team's measurements, all that fun stuff. So that's coming soon, like within 2 weeks. But for today, just go download the app yourself and enjoy the measurement, one free measurement a day.
Thanks so much for staying on the call and on the webinar. And I wish you a very nice day. And I encourage you, measure your pulse.